Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. Coming to you on the 26th day of August, 2024. It is a Monday, and it's late. Oh, man. You know when they say that day job? Well, look, there's a whole lot of things going on in my world. They're conspiring to keep me busy. But I made a commitment. We're going to get to at least 700 episodes, and then I'm going to decide what the next step is. All right, today's going to be the Monday Blues. Why? It just came to mind. Who knows? And, again, before we get there, let me remind you the thing that will be most helpful, that all I ask is to like, share, subscribe to this here program. Join me on the social media of your choice. I have a page and a group over at Facebook. I am a pro at Gab. I still drop in at MeWe. And yes, you can still find most of my programming on the YouTube. Someday, well, I'll either have a lot more time or more money to invest, and we'll figure out how to get up on those other streaming services. But for now, we're going to make do with what we've got. The algorithm, not my friend, apparently not your friend either, but we're going to keep doing what we do. And while we are here, let me remind you that there's some other local people that have jumped into the programming game. So coming out of Plano, a friend of mine and her daughter are doing a show, the Plano's Political Bulldog. For those of you in Collin County, what happens in Plano? I'm sorry, it's Plano's Political Pitbull. What am I thinking? Plano's Political Pitbull. Check it out. Apologize for jacking up that name, but you should go listen to Esther and Ruth over there. Quite informative. Definitely a change of pace for me. A lot less sarcasm. That being said, very educational. And that's the thing. If you're in Collin County, what's happening in Plano is coming to a town near you. In addition to that, there is a McKinney podcast. A friend of mine and his friend are doing that. You should check it out. Let me give you the right address here once. It is the McKinney Podcast. James Jenkins and Fred Mahusai. Check it out. I must admit, I have not listened to too many of those programs. I have, however, listened to the Plano Political Pitbulls. Very interesting. Apparently, over at the Plano podcast, or the McKinney Podcast, they interviewed the Democrat running for the 3rd District of Texas. So that should be very interesting. All right. In either case, two pretty darn good programs that are here, local, worth your time. Check it out. I won't say that they're your cup of tea, especially if you like mine. But if you want local programming, the podcast world is where you go now. Once upon a time, we had local radio. Once upon a time, there was more than one local radio station, and you could find, your local DJ talking about what's going on out your backyard. Apparently those days are long gone now, and it's a shame. It's a shame. But we do what we can with what we've got. All right. The programming for today is, we're going to talk about a death in the family, country on the brink, no turning back, and what are some next actions that you can take. All right. So I have a family friend. They lost a member of their family. I got to say, it was, a very sad situation, but the outpouring of the community was very impressive. And it's interesting in the sense that you never know the people that you impact, right? I've often wondered, what impact do I have What are people going to remember when I'm gone? Because I don't plan on living forever. To my knowledge, only one person's really successfully pulled that one off. In other words, they didn't die. There might be two. But that being said, historically speaking, we all die. And what is left behind when we go are our friends, our family, the memories. And in theory, you don't actually die. You just move on to, the afterlife, whether that's heaven or hell. Perhaps you think something different. That's fine. But my worldview is, if you're on the straight and narrow, right, you know where you're going to go. And you go rejoice with the Heavenly Father. And you never really know where somebody's at, and it's not our job to figure that out. We're not the final judge. You can judge actions, you can judge behaviors, but you can't judge people's immortal souls. So as I reflect on that, I think, what do you leave behind, right? So I don't want to dwell on the specifics of this instance, because that's a private family matter, and I don't know enough that I would even feel comfortable commenting. So I'm turning this on the idea for you, dear listener. Did you ever take a moment to consider that? What will your friends think? What will your family think? What will your children or grandchildren think? What did you leave behind? What impact did you make? I think oftentimes as conservatives, right, we spend a lot of time fretting about what other people are doing and don't necessarily focus on what we're doing or what we could be doing. And we're not necessarily steering into adversity. We're looking to avoid it. Now, I always make the comment, I don't go looking for fights, but I won't back down when they come to me. And I think as conservatives, at least politically speaking, we spend a whole lot of time not picking fights. We spend a whole lot of time negotiating, backing down, and trying to avoid what many believe is inevitable. So I wonder, some of the great conservative luminaries that have come before me, and by all means, I don't consider myself worthy to tie their shoes, but I think for my money, the last great conservative luminary that I believe is still alive, I would have to look this up, but Pat Buchanan, right? He's retired. He's not really doing anything anymore. That guy's written at least a dozen books. I've got 3 or 4 of them. Every one of them that I've read has been very interesting, very informative, and pretty chock full of information. And I think a lot of people, they see what they want to see out of the guy, and I think it's a mistake. But I think about the lasting impact. I would say, other than Ron Paul, as far as living people that have had a political influence on me, he would be right there. I mean, I'm trying to think. I want to say it was A Republic, Not an Empire is, a very solid refutation of the idea of the enormous state looking to go conquer other people, right? It's interesting because people are afraid to push back or come up with a different idea, but I've never seen Pat Buchanan back down from that. I watched him on many of Sunday morning show be the solo act, fighting the good fight all on his own. You got to give a guy a lot of credit for that. So I think when he's gone, which, it may be 5 years, maybe 5 days. It might be a long time beyond those 5 years. What was left in his wake? What did he do? What generation is following him? I mean, I imagine Dr. Paul is kind of in the same boat at this point. He still does his Liberty Report. But young people have to get engaged and they have to understand what's going on. That's something I've always believed in firmly. That's something I've tried to invest in the next generation. And now north of 50, I'm looking at it and I think to myself, for the 20 so years that have been in the recent past, I've always thought, if there must be a problem, let it happen now while I'm still young enough to do something about it. And now I look and I'm, definitely in the middle age, and I think to myself, now that we have problems here, let them be resolved while I'm still young enough to do something about it. But the whole time I'm trying to invest in the next generation. I'm trying to pour into young people that follow me because I won't be here forever. And when I look around and I see the country on the brink, I wonder if I'm still going to be able to do anything about it. So, we're talking about Monday, we're talking about the blues, and I got to be honest, losing people is a challenge. It's difficult. It wasn't terribly long ago I lost my mother. I mean, you can console yourself that she's hanging with Jesus, and that's all well and good, but I can't help but think that, she's missed out some really unique or exciting things that have happened in the last few years. So what does that translate to, right? And then I look at all the negative or the less than stellar things that have occurred over the last few years. And I think, well, she did get to miss this stuff. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time just talking about the insanity that we went through in 2020, 2021. And we still haven't solved that problem, right? We still haven't resolved the issues that occurred of that. And we're on the brink of going even further over. I mean, we are going to come in within a whisker of electing a leftist progressive socialist and her right-hand sidekick, the guy that is single-handedly running Minnesota into the ground. I mean, granted, it was a Farm Labor Party Democrat stronghold, right? They're left as the left goes, but didn't think that they wanted to destroy their state. But that's where we're at. We're looking at being led by people that actually hate the country that we're in and seek to fix it by destroying it. It sounds like the old meme from Vietnam, to save the village, we had to destroy it. To save America, we must destroy it. That kind of echoes somebody talking about fundamentally transforming America. Now, granted, most of these elected officials are nothing more than frontmen, right? They take their marching orders. They're not their own person. If you pay attention to any of the stuff going on in the background, you can kind of see it. If you spend too much time looking at that, you go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. But I am still convinced that the best understanding of history is a conspiracy history. It doesn't mean you get everything right, but you certainly see things that you would otherwise ignore or you would cast off to being a coincidence. And I gotta say, I believe a lot of things that happen are in fact not coincidences. They're designed to happen a way. I mean, you look at what happened in 9/11 and, just coincidentally, we have the Patriot Act, which has brought about the exact opposite of patriotism, but hey, what do I know? We routinely hold up funding and taking care of our former military, the veterans, because we tie everything together in this omnibus budget bill or the Defense Authorization Act, right? We're not taking care of our responsibilities because we're tying them to other things, which are usually detrimental, if not to us, the other countries that we're meddling in. So when I say we're on the brink of our own destruction brought about by our own bad behavior. But secondarily, We're on the brink of World War III. I mean, some have said that it's already started. It just hadn't lit up yet, right? Think of the time that the Anschluss was taking place, right? Or that Japan was messing around in Manchuria. They weren't really fully up to speed yet, but there was war going on. We look at what's going on between Ukraine and Russia, and look, I've said many, many times in the past, I don't believe either side are good guys. But there's one thing that I have no doubt of. Putin loves his country. He loves Russia. He claims to be an Orthodox Christian. Take that as you want. I've heard, rumblings that he's making overtures to the Muslims. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't know what's going on here. But I am saying that I'm very concerned about what happens with Europe. And where Europe goes, the United States follows. I reflect on the idea that there's not one, there's not two, but there's probably, at this point, a half a dozen states that are investigating versions of independence. I mean, Alaska and California are the obvious ones. New Hampshire, Texas. I guess to a lesser extent, Florida and Vermont or Maine could be lumped in there, right? Then there's the folks that are in Eastern Oregon that are tired of the crazy coming out of Western Oregon. They want to just go join Idaho and get it over with. We're on the brink. Now, Brian McClanahan talks about it. If we would just think locally and act locally, we'd fix a lot of these problems. Trying to run the country from the center has brought us no peace. I was listening to John Harris be interviewed on Tom Woods' show, and they're talking about the idea that perhaps we would all be better off if we were able to live like we want to live in the states that we live in. And in other words, the majority culture of that state would dictate the terms of how that state operates. And if you're not comfortable there, feel free to go to another state. This is just an outgrowth of what the original option was, that you have these states that behave independently and they just agree to work together to repel invasion and to deal with foreign affairs and to protect commerce. But it seems that the Yankee attitude that's come out of the Northeast and transferred over to California and, quite frankly, the entire left coast, they're not content to let people be. They're not content to let people express themselves and live their own lives without being dictated by this Yankee attitude that we know what's best and we're going to make darn sure you get it. Now, I know that's frustrating. I know that there are people that would like to deal with it with one way or another. But just simply, if you say no, you disengage, you take away their power, their authority. Just say no. Right? So while we might be on the brink, we can dial it back. We can tone it down. We can avoid yet another mistake. But I think our national leadership just doesn't seem to care. If they don't have somebody under their thumb, it's like they don't know what to do with themselves. So when I consider this, and I think about where they're pushing us and what they're doing to us and the conditions that we're dealing with, I can't help but feel a little down about this. I mean, to be sure, it's not the end of the world. It could be the end of the world as we know it. I mean, we've gone through that before, right? Tawatkanee. But it's not over. It's never over. I mean, the world's come through worse things than this. I mean, however bad it may get, short of nuclear Armageddon, we've been through this before. We can get through it. Now, it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be difficult. There are going to be challenges. We're going to have a whole lot of suffering and pain and sorrow. But when I look at the idea that our country's on the brink, and here we're getting ready to possibly elect somebody that's incompetent, unqualified, based on the chromosomes, which apparently only matter when it's possible elected official when determining the sex. And because she's got a certain amount of melanin in her skin, potentially that she might be something special. Now, I seem to remember the late, great Rush Limbaugh had a few nicknames for this person. Commie Harris, Heels Up. I mean, why would anybody take this person seriously? I mean, and the leftist, socialist, progressive that she picked to be her running mate, or, well, more than likely, when we had to settle for her because Sleepy Creepy Joe finally is no longer able to run, they gifted us somebody that's possibly worse, significantly worse, and then she just one-upped us, more than likely by somebody else's directive, to bring in quite possibly the worst governor in these United States. And the scary thing is, they might win. I'm really concerned about what that looks like. I mean, look, leftist progressives, the socialists, they riot for anything. They just need an excuse. At the drop of a hat, we'll go burn things down, tear things up, and hey, the lady running for vice president at the time created a fund to get them out on bail. And then, the governor of Minnesota, he just let it burn. He wasn't interested in solving the problem. He wasn't interested in putting an end to it. Nope, we're just going to let it burn. Not worried about it. Hey, but don't forget I got your tampons in the school for you, buddy. I mean, where do we get these guys from? And yet, there's going to probably be 60-some million people that are going to run out and vote for these chuckleheads because, they were told to. They have a D after their name. And I've spent the better part of 8 years saying, the Donald's not my first choice. He's the only choice. The same 8 years, I placated the idea that, he wasn't the best guy. He wasn't my first choice. There's lots of issues. But at this point, that's all we got left. I mean, we've got a 1960s era Democrat running as a Republican, which sounds about right. And we're running around like he's the champion. And honestly, from where I'm sitting, he's the only option we got. And when he's gone, I don't know what we're going to do. That should bother a lot of people. I mean, the whole idea of you cultivate a succession plan, that you make sure that you have people in place so that when people move up or move out, there's somebody else that's at least somewhat competent waiting in the wings to step up. I think it just seems entirely lost on the party with an R after their name. But again, what other option do we have? Do we just leave it to the leftist progressive socialists to run the entire country into the ground and, quite frankly, bring us into war? No, we can't do that. But we also have to come to grips with there's really no turning back. Right? Turn back to what? To who? I mean, the champion of my party is a throwback 60 years and a Democrat. Now, he's still the champion of my party, and the thing is, I'm going to vote for him. And I'm going to willingly vote for him and support him. Because he's so much better than the other option. And quite frankly, I blame my parents. Not my parents specifically, but my parents' generation. I blame the greatest generation, most especially. And I blame my own generation. We own a piece of that too. We took that peace dividend, rolled it into dumping the kids into government-sponsored schools, didn't look at what was being done, didn't care. As long as they came home fairly well educated and adjusted, they could get their skulls of mush filled with garbage, and we just didn't care. And we have at least 2 generations out there of quasi-socialists, thanks to our lack of care and lack of effort. Now look. As a parent, I did what I could to make sure that my daughters kind of knew the real score, heard the other side of things. I introduced them to the idea that history is just one person's version of what happened or one side's version of it. There's always more. It's never clean and clear what actually happened. Rarely in history Is there a distinct right and wrong? There's almost always precipitating factors that conveniently get glossed over. People forget about them or choose not to speak of them. Rarely is anybody innocent. So when I look at what we're dealing with, then it comes to, well, what are we going to turn back to? I mean, I got to say the Democrats have played a really good job of saying, well, we can't go back to the 50s and the 60s. Well, because in the 50s and the 60s, women were able to stay home and take care of their families. And we would be depriving them of their careers that they all desire. Or worse yet, in certain parts of our country, read almost all the country, we treated people poorly that didn't look like me or sound like me. Yeah, that may be true, but I suspect if you go anywhere else in the world, you might find that that's still true all the time, everywhere. Again, not excusing it, not saying it's a good thing, just saying that was reality. Now, it's irrational, it's foolish, it's detrimental, but that's the world we live in. If you don't have in-group preferences, you're really not looking out for yourself. And if you don't believe me, I mean, just disengage from what you've been fed, right? Because you can't go back. There's no turning back. But going forward, pay attention. Every other group out there has no problem putting their group first when they're hiring, promoting. And I get it. It doesn't offend me. It doesn't bother me. I understand it. I mean, that's why the Irish and a lot of police and fire stations kind of ran the place. They looked out for themselves. That's why the Italians and, well, mostly crime, but I'm kidding. But I mean, they did a lot of other things because they looked out for each other. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Hispanics are doing it right here, right now. The Jews, of course. I mean, they always put themselves first. I get it. Nobody should be upset about this. It's understood. More recently, the Indians, or perhaps the Pakis, or, Chinese. It's fine. They want to look out for themselves. They want to take care of their family. I get it. It's only the foolish European white people that just think that, well, we wouldn't want to be unfair. We wouldn't want to look out for our own extended family. Everything will be just fine. Okay, how's it working out for us? We lived off the idea that merit was all that mattered. Yeah, that got tossed out the door. As soon as, quote unquote, our people weren't in charge anymore, it was made clear that nobody really cared about merit. Nope. We want diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what's really important. We're not really concerned whether or not somebody's qualified. We just care about what their chromosomes are and what their skin tone is. I mean, that's what they've taught us. They've taught at least one generation of young people that they should hate themselves because of what they look like in the mirror. Or they should question whether or not God made a mistake when they were born. I mean, how does that sound for making sense of what's going on? But again, you can't go back. So realistically, that brings us on to what is the next action? What can be done? Where do you go from here? What are the opportunities? Well, we have, thankfully, talked about some of this, right? There are plenty of people out there that are looking at alternate ways of doing things. Whether it's Andrew Isker talking about the Boniface option, right? Be bold, pronounce your Christianity, and take a stand. Then you got the guys over in Moscow, Idaho. They're creating their own community right in the middle of a college town. And they're fighting the good fight. They're getting involved. They're taking a stand. They're making a difference. There's a whole nother several communities moving into Tennessee. I know Andrew Iskar, I just found that out today, that he's moving to Tennessee because he can no longer stay in his home state of Minnesota. There's all sorts of things playing out in Texas right here, right now. You can create a separate community. You can create a community within a community. You can create your own platforms. You can create your own ecosystems, not in the ecological sense, but in the business sense, right? Take your own platforms. You can do all these things while we have some level of liberty left. But if you're not taking action now, if you're not adapting now, if you're not moving now, if you're not taking advantage of what's available, it's going to become too late. Now, as somebody that's over 50 and already on their second career, I got to tell you, I'm not sure what's next for me. I know there's change coming. I know that I've got my hands full. I know that I've got a podcast that, I promised 5 episodes or at least 4 a week, and I can't deliver. There's too many things going on. Now, some of this is a good thing, right? It is a blessing, but the curse of blessing sometimes is you have to let go of other things, right? The Lord provides you opportunities, but you have to let go of other things that you have. You cannot do everything. You cannot be everything. You just can't. So what do? What difference are you making? What can be done? So I look at this, and, I already downscaled to doing 3 episodes a week. And for the last several weeks, I've been lucky to get 2 out. So as my listeners, I guess I'm back down to 4 listeners now at this point. I imagine some of you are wondering what exactly is going on. What is your plan? What are you going to do? And I think that's a fair question, right? But really the question is, what can be done? I've tied myself to a political party. We've made some advances. We've fought the good fight. We're trying to make sense of what's the good way to go forward. How do we redeem the county? Not in a spiritual sense, but in a political sense, right? If we let go, the leftist progressives, the socialists, they'll win. They already have a working majority on the big 4 city councils. I mean, nominally, they're all run by Republican mayors that are doing great things for their city. They're spending money like there's no tomorrow. They're bringing in apartments like gangbusters. They're altering the culture. And they're making lots of money while they're doing it. Maybe not them specifically, because, that would be untoward, and we're not allowed to make those accusations, nor am I. I'm just saying that somebody's making some serious coin based upon what's going on here. But you know what? In a capitalistic society, a profit is not a bad thing. But you do have to consider the cost, right? What's your trade-off? So, Frisco's probably passed up McKinney now as the second largest town in Collin County, or second largest city, if you will. I don't know the exact statistic, but I think they're in the neighborhood of about 220,000. We're at the neighborhood of about 212,000. So we're essentially neck and neck. Frisco was led by a let's call it a more visionary, business forward approach, which spurred on rapid growth, but brought in a ton of transplants, a ton of transient people, and took what was once a very red chunk of the state, or I should say a county within the state, and turned it bright purple. Now, is that the end of the world? No. Can we still get good conservative, good, quote unquote Christian ideas taken care of? Well, yes, absolutely. But we have to fight the good fight. We have to know what we stand for. We have to be able to articulate in such a way that brings other people in and makes them understand that this is a net positive. And then McKinney got caught lagging behind, and we've tried to up our game. And then, of course, there was Allen in the mix, right? Again, all ostensibly run by Republicans. Now, we can color outside the lines and say, well, they're not our flavor Republican. But here's the thing. When you're in a very red state, everybody's a Republican. Not everybody's conservative. Not everybody's Christian. Or they may be culturally Christian, maybe. But and bad behavior is never punished. It can all be forgiven. Just sign here. Put your donation in the box and let's move on. But let me ask you, is that the net positive? Is that going to give us what we're looking for? Is that really a way to build something up? I'm not so sure. But again, we have options. We can take action. The problem is, way too often, we conservatives, we Christians, we're always reactive. And when we react poorly because we're guided by our emotions. We misjudge people's actions or motivations. We assume the worst of everybody. Now, the equivalent is I often assume people to be the best. Or I assume the best intentions from people, I should say. And that's equally a problem. So when we move forward, when we take action, we have to consider what's our end goal? What are we trying to do? Now, if I look at Collin County and how do we redeem it, at least politically, there's a number of ways that can happen. But the purpose of this podcast is not to spill out political advantages or policies. It's merely to give you an idea of things that you could be doing, you should be doing. Step one is get involved. Before you get involved, you might want to pick your passion project. You might want to pick your policy issue. You might want to pick the thing that's most concerning to you. Learn about it. Have a command and grasp of the issue or issues related to that issue, thing of interest, and take action. Build upon that. If you're not willing to do that, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to improve. Because like I said, you can't turn back. What's done is done. How do we move forward? Where are we going? What are our goals? If you can't figure that out, if you can't articulate it, then maybe you need to take some time and sort it out. Now, I really wish I had more answers than that. I really wish I could kind of metaphorically look into your head and figure out what it is that is your motivation, what it is your issue, and I could give you maybe some more specific advice, but I don't have that. And there are lots of options for kids and grandkids to educate them, to open their mind to new ideas. I mean, there's the McClanahan Academy, there's Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom, there's also Ron Paul's Homeschool, right? There's the Tuttle Twin books. There's all these different things out there. There's Chris Ann Hall's got half dozen books or whatever out, speaking engagements, classes that she teaches. These are all pro-liberty things that are readily available for an inexpensive cost. And even if it is expensive, are your children or your grandchildren worth it? Is it a worthwhile investment? See, that's the thing that if I was going to critique conservatives and be harsh, we're not willing to spend our money. We're not willing to put our money where our mouth is. That's why the Democrats, the leftist progressives are beating us. That's why the socialists win in the end, is because we weren't willing to commit. They're all committed to their goals. They're all committed to the outcome that they want. Now, look, there's a whole lot of their quote-unquote foot soldiers. They're getting paid to do it. But that's why they're committed. They're getting something out of it because somebody's willing to pony up the coin to get them off their butts. If we don't take action similar to that, we're going to lose. And once we lose, there's nowhere left to go. No one's coming to save us. Texas might be the best state. Texas might be the best case to protect and save these United States. But if we can't even hold Texas, if we can't reelect Ted Cruz with 55 or 56% of the popular vote, what good is it? If we can't lead by example, if we're getting one-upped left and right by Florida and Oklahoma, now don't get me wrong, that's a great thing that Florida, Oklahoma, and Idaho and some other states are doing things bolder than what we're doing, because maybe that'll spur our leadership to do something. But if we want to lead, we have to actually lead. We have to be motivated to do something. We cannot depend on the same old, but that's where we're at. That requires commitment. That requires an investment. That requires you, dear listener, to do something more than what you're already doing. It's okay that we lose. It's okay that there's setbacks. That's to be expected. But you get back up and you keep moving. If you give up ground today, you got to take it back tomorrow. The less ground you give up is the less you've got to take back. But we cannot agree to be led by people that refuse to take action. We cannot agree to follow somebody that's in retreat. We have to be willing to say no. We have to be willing to take action and move forward. And if that means we got to do it behind a guy named Trump, so be it. If that means we've got to do it to help Ted Cruz get across the finish line, all the better. But we have to start promoting from within. We have to start activating those people around us. We have to start planning on a succession plan, because let me tell you, a lot of these great patriot leaders we have are 10, 15, 20 years older than me, and I don't know who's going to follow them. I don't know that they know who's going to follow them. But there's a whole lot of people that are my age that are more worried about where they are, who they are, what their status is, and what they control or what they think they control, than looking towards the future. And it would be helpful, useful, if those folks that are ahead of us in this pecking order would do the same. Hey, this is our goal in the future. This is where we'd like to see these people taking place, or what we would like to see them do. We need to help them get there. We need to help you become better. And that's a challenge, because it's got a requirement of checking your ego at the door and doing what's best for the long term. And with that, this has been According to Callus. I've said enough, so I will see you on the other side.
TexianPride.com is the destination for Texans who want to show off their love for Texas. We don't settle for mediocre. Our shirts are made from 100% high-quality athletic cotton. They're cool, comfortable, and designed to fit and flatter any body type. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit TexianPride.com for your next stylish Texas tee.